Bonjour tout le monde, good morning everybody, and welcome to the GT4 European Series on the Circuit Paul Ricard at Le Castellet in the south of France. It's a gorgeous morning as we prepare ourselves for the second round of this 2023 championship, and it's qualifying time here at the circuit. 24.5 degrees air temperature. It's obviously going to be an interesting one as the circuit continues to develop. We had some showers yesterday, which has definitely made things tricky in terms of setup, because most of free practice 2 ended up being a little bit on the back foot. But we've certainly got some good battles ahead of us as we go into qualifying. I'm Jake Sanson, beside me is Ben Constanduros. We're going to have a fabulous qualifying session.
I love GT4 racing, and we've got even more cars on the grid this weekend because we've invited the Scandinavian Championship across, and we have a couple of cars, actually 9 entries from the Scandinavian Championship. So look out for the different coloured numbers that represent those particular cars, and that leaves us with around 45 entrants for the European Championship, and of course they are split into 3 different classes: the Silver, the Pro-Am and the Am categories, all with their own little races within this massive field of cars. And of course the expanses of Paul Ricard allow great racing without too much risk, but you know, it's always quite frenetic when it comes to GT4s.
It certainly is. You just saw one of our guests, Gustavo Xavier. Basically, the quickest way to determine a guest is anybody in treble figures other than the 2 cars that already had triple figures. So the Autosport GP LS Group Performance number 110 and the CSA Racing treble 1. All the other cars, including this one, are our guests. And that is the 290, the Toyota Gazoo Racing Sweden car of the former European KZ2 champion, Emil Skaras of Sweden. He's done a fantastic job in his gearbox karting days, which suits him quite well for GT4, and has definitely got himself a very exciting run in Scandinavia. Great to see him on the European stage here at Paul Ricard. There is Emil Skaras, getting himself up to speed and getting it 2 wheels in the air and 2 on the deck, nice and early through that first chicane. The numbers start with the number 2, so all the cars with numbers 2 onwards are from the Scandinavian Championship. And effectively, this is a Works Toyota team, a national Works team from Sweden, but it is still supported by Toyota Sweden, and they have always been very, very strong, leaving some skid lines there down the bottom end of circuit as the front end doesn't quite bite in that Toyota. You can see how high it sits. So always one of the characteristics of the Super GT4 Evo, it needs to sit quite high. That is the BOP, the balance of performance, that allows all of these cars to run at similar speeds despite the vast differences in shapes and size. They are all balanced, and they're balanced either from a restrictor point of view, so the amount of air that gets into the engine, or indeed from a chassis point of view, jacking them up in the air to allow more air to run under the car and therefore less downforce created by the flat floor. And the Toyota has always looked quite upright, and it does allow them to ride those curbs, unlike some of the other cars that sit a bit lower and therefore would do damage to the floor if they do kiss some of the... There's not many sausage curbs around here, but there are 1 or 2. Couple of bits of housekeeping from round 1. There are only 3 Mirage Racing Aston Martins this time as opposed to 2, so the number 6 car is not racing. Jamie Day was driving that. He's now gone alongside Rubendale Sart in the number 5 car, replacing Emil Heyerdahl, and Roy van der Steur is not racing. Romain Carton and Louis Merrick in the other car, in the number 7. They have already had a very strong weekend because they were fastest in free practice 1, and they were top 10 in free practice 2. So watch out for the number 7 Mirage Aston. They've got a great chance of going pole position across the qualifying sessions, and they were certainly very, very fast over the course of things. What else can we tell you? Well, the Aston Martin Vantage of Andreas Bachmann and Jessica Bachmann, that is essentially a new team for them for this weekend, despite the fact that the brother and sister combination are still racing in this championship, but they have switched teams from one race weekend to another. So they're still here, but they've just decided to move to a different operation. Yeah, the car is essentially the same. I
think it is the same car, and I'm not entirely sure whether that's just a renamed version of Pro Sport. It's still an entry from Germany, now called Racing 1, but I have a feeling that might just be more of an admin thing than anything else. Yeah. We also can add a second W&S car to our entry list. They had a horrible time, if you remember, in Monza last time out, writing off
all 3 of their Caymans, 1 in practice and 2, 1 in qualifying and then 1 in the race. So Max Kronberg and Henrik still in the 30, but we now have a 4-4-2, which is Taylor Hagler, the American, and Gustav Xavier, and that's a Pro-Am entry, the number 4-4-2 car.
There are a couple of other absences from Monza. Sadly, we don't have the brilliant guys from Newbridge Motorsport. They should have been here, and we were obviously really hoping they would be. Way too much damage sustained in the incident for them at Monza. Very unfortunate. We wish Alex Denning, Matt Topham, and the whole team the very best of British, and hopefully they'll be back in time for Spa. And it's similar for the AGS Events squad number 68 car of Julien Lambert and Romano Ricci. They're not here, but that's not due to damage. We believe that's down to work commitments. But the other 2 cars of Nicolas Kumar and Mike Parisi in the 89 and Vincent Bouteille and Timothy Bourret in the 98, they are still here.
If you're new to GT4 qualifying, we have 2 sessions. And in this first session, 1 driver qualifies the car. That will be the starting driver for race 1, which is this afternoon. And then we will have a break, and then we'll have a second 20-minute qualifying session where the second driver will get in and qualify themselves for race 2, where they will start the car. So 2 separate qualifying sessions. Obviously important in qualifying 1 to make sure you don't bin the car or have a problem with the car to get through to qualifying 2, to give it to your second driver, because an issue in this session does affect your second session and it therefore affects your full weekend's worth of action. It's interesting to note, you mentioned the weather, huge storms yesterday evening and the evening before. Otherwise, beautiful weather, 24 degrees track temperature and 20 degrees in the air, warming up, getting humid, thunderstorms brewing over the Alps, and then big thunderstorms in the evenings. Guess when we're racing GT4? This evening. So fingers crossed that the storms don't transpire. It is very much formed over the mountains that surround us here. The Maritime Alps, which provided us with some fantastic rallying action last October when we came here for the Motorsport Games. But they are quite high and up to 2,000 meters in height, and therefore that heat off the Mediterranean. We're only, well, half an hour's drive, 20 kilometers as the crow flies from the Mediterranean. And so there's a lot of, I'm not quite sure the technical geographical term of the clouds moving from the sea over the mountains, but it causes thunderstorms.
Yeah, my limited knowledge is extended to cumulonimbus, and that's about it, unfortunately. Stanislav Savarnov is the man who is up front at the moment for the NM Racing team, the Prime Class number 88 Mercedes. They just banged in a 2:13.5 to go top so far. 11.5 minutes still on the clock. Romain Carton, the car that was fastest in free practice 1, is currently second, 0.4 of a second away. 0.005 of a second shy of that is Jamie Day of Great Britain, although he lives, of course, in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Then Alexander Papadopoulos in the second of the NM Racing team Mercedes is 4th place. So it's Mercedes and Aston Martin all the way at the moment in the top 4. Then we have Dante Rapanga in 5th position, the V8 Racing Chevrolet. They had some damage yesterday from free practice, and they've managed to get that sorted just in time. I think they were scrabbling around this morning trying to make sure that the work they had done to their front end was going to be compatible. It must be, because now they're out there and in the top 5, so thank goodness for that. Victor Bouveng, the MBLR Racing BMW in the Pro-Am category, they are in 6th position until the CSA Racing team turn up. Gael Castelli has just banged it into 3rd position, and now Paul Carap in the Autosport Alpine has gone top spot with a 2:12.8.
And that's a really good time. We saw 11s, 2:13 11s in practice. We're already into the 12s, and we've got the 74 machine nearly in the 11s already. The Aston Martins seem to be the cars to have this weekend from practice, although in second practice it was interrupted by the rain, and therefore we didn't get a full picture of what happened there. But Aston Martin at the head of the field for the moment.
Plenty of lap times being cancelled due to track limits. Obviously, the big point on the circuit where that is going to be an interesting one is at the end of the, well, both ends of the Mistral Straight, to be honest, because they're running wide onto it and they're running wide off it as well.
Yeah, GT3, the race control direction is the white line is what counts as track limits these days. There has been the over the years the possibility of running 4 wheels off as long as you don't hit the floppies, and you'll see the floppies on the exit of some of the turns, but and also on the entry, of course, by cutting 4 wheels on the inside.
but it does seem as though the white line is now, you must keep 2 wheels inside the white line at all times, and that is tricky in these cars at this particular point of the circuit where there is not, there you can see the floppies, there's not a huge amount of downforce pushing these cars onto the track, and therefore there's this kind of sensation of floating at really high speed, and to completely judge correctly where you need to place the car is not easy.
And what was it that Mario Andretti always used to say is that fast is loose.
Yeah.
So you have to try and flirt with that as much as possible to try and get the maximum out of what the car can give you. Victor Weyrich puts the racing spirit of Le Mans Aston Martin back on top again at 2:12.009. Goodness me. Big lap there from that last one. Fastest of all in the second sector. Fastest of all in the first sector, though, is the Alpine again. So Paul Ricard, when he comes through this time, could well put this back on the top, but a bit tricky in the second sector. So a lot of time lost there by the Alpine in that second sector. That's where they seem to be weakest of all at the moment. But our guests, the Toyota Gazoo Racing Sweden car, is third at the moment. Emil Skaras has just banged that car up to third position. And now we've got 5 different manufacturers, make that 6 in the top 6 places. So it's very competitive at the moment. We've got Aston Martin, Alpine, Mercedes, Toyota, Porsche and Audi all filling the top 6 places. But where is the first sub 2-minute 12 lap going to come from? Because we've certainly got quite a few contenders who are up for the scrap. The Alpine has the potential to go there if they can tidy up the second and third sectors. So far, as we saw in practice, the Aston Martin does appear to be the best all-round GT4 car around Paul Ricard so far. So we've got the Audi of Gregory Gilbert. They've just popped up into third position. The Santaloc Audi, they've gone into third, just in front of Denis Bulatov in the East Side machine. Emil Skadas down to 5th now in the Toyota Gazoo Racing Sweden. Brilliant to see one of the guests, though, up in the top 10. Never mind the top 5. And then Hendrik Still has put the WNS Porsche in 6th position. Definitely not hoping for a repeat of qualifying from Monza. That was a scary moment at the Variante della Roggia. And then Enzo Gillier is now into 8th position. I was going to say 7th, but now Benjamin Lariche in the speed car Audi has just put the car up into the top 5 in 4th position so far. And then 9th place, Gad Castelli, the CSA Audi, has actually just dropped to 10th. He's just been displaced by Laurent Hurgon in the 2nd of the Autosport Alpines. And here come the Borisson Automotives. You've got Enzo Gillier in 8th, and now Berke Bessler is in 9th.
Just to confirm, white lines is track limits this year in GT4, so 4 wheels off the circuit. The Swiss timing systems that have been developed over the last couple of years in the SRO series, giving GPS tracking on all these cars and positions on track very accurately, so they are able to detect when you go 4 wheels off quite quickly and penalise them. We're seeing some of the early runners, those Toyotas that banged in the laps very, very early on, possibly have made the best of their tyres now and trying to get out of the way. That's 4 wheels off, so that will be a lap deletion for Gregory Gilbert, 2nd row at the moment, and that's one of the cars you would really expect to see at the sharp end of the field. Interestingly, the first 2, the front row on the grid at the moment, the 74 and the 110 are both in the pits. They've bailed out, they've done enough. And you have to say, Victor Weyrich's 12.009, 8/10 faster than anybody else. I'm not surprised he feels comfortable with that, because the grid was separated, the first 20 were separated by a second in practice, and there's nearly a second between him and 2nd place there.
Yeah, there's a theoretical best potential of 2:11.8, but to be honest, you've got to get it absolutely perfect in all 3 sectors to be able to nail it, and it's very tough to find one car that will be able to do that in all 3 sectors, given the traffic, given the amount of rubber that's washed off the circuit from yesterday's free practice. So getting a time like 2:12.0, why stretch the car further? The worst you're going to get is 2nd or 3rd on the grid from that, so why not?
See if anybody can find some time in the latter stages. All 55 cars out on circuit, although I think the 89 machine is struggling with an issue. That is one of the AGS events, Aston Martins of Mike Parisi. We do sadly have a history with AGS of having various issues with their cars, and he's been in the pits for 6 minutes now. He did come out onto track, brought it back in. He is 55th of the 55 cars with a lap time 10 seconds slower than the nearest competitor. So definitely an issue for Mike Parisi. He should be handing that car over in the 2nd session to Niklas Gumar, who is the AM in the Pro-Am category car there. But for the moment, fingers crossed. We also had a pit stop from Hartvig, which is a Porsche Cayman. That's from the Allied racing team, Alexander Hartvig, and he came in and went back out, the only other car to do so.
So what's happening per class? Well, obviously Victor Weyrich is leading the way in both the silver class and overall. The Pro-Am pole is currently looking the way of Gregory Gilvert in the Santalog Audi, looking very strong there as Henrik Still comes into the pits and parks it for the time being, probably for the session as well now, because it's only 2 minutes 9, roughly, 2 minutes 12, sorry, roughly for the lap. The pole position currently in the AM category is Laurent Hergon in the Autosport Alpine car, looking very strong as he continues his way forward. So that is looking pretty handy for him on a 2:13.3 at the current present state of affairs. So they're running pretty strong. So those are your 3 pole sitters, because obviously there are only the 3 classes in GT4 European Series: Silver, Pro-Am and AM. And that's obviously going to be really interesting to note, because the AM pole position is only, well, how is that? It's only 1.3 seconds off the pole position, so very competitive indeed.
Yeah, but remember there's a pro in there at the moment.
There is a pro in there at the moment. A fair argument, yes. It obviously bodes well for them in terms of gunning for the victory, but they have got some stiff competition already in the shape of Alban Veruti in the AVR Avatar Porsches. They were looking quite strong in practice, so it looks as though the number 10 car is definitely going to be a staunch competitor going into the races itself, as they're not far off in terms of pace. They're less than 0.3 of a second off the pace of the Alpine, so expect Alpine versus Porsche in the AM category right from the off.
Remember, we really enjoyed seeing the McLaren Artura GT4 car at Monza. 2 cars entered by Elite Motorsport, and the 77 machine of Tom Emerson and Josh Ratikin sitting down in 31st position. Josh Ratikin qualifying that car at the moment. The other car, though, that has Jack Mitchell aboard right now, up in 9th position. Mitchell with a really good time that last time through. There is also 1 car in the Scandinavian Championship as well. The Artura Alfab have always entered McLaren. They had a 720 last year. And they are in a McLaren again, and Daniel Roos has qualified that car in the Pro-Am category. 2 categories in the Scandinavian Championship as well, let's not forget. We've got a Pro-Am and an AM, although not entirely sure if our timing screen is differentiating the 2 of them, which makes our challenge a little bit greater.
Does indeed. I tell you what, look out for that Alfab McLaren, though, from the Scandinavian team, currently being driven by Daniel Roos, the number 288. Look out for that, because the livery they've put that car in, it's in proper Ronnie Peterson mode. It looks absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, they always did. They always had really, really good liveries over the years. Romain Monti is looking fast in the first sector, only 33rd at the moment in the Mercedes. Weird to talk about Romain Monti in the Mercedes, having spent a few years in that Toyota, but here he is at the end of the long straight. We get a chance to see and feel how the Armada racing car looks. Shares the car with Jordan Grimaud in the Pro-Am category. So Romain is the pro driver. As you say, sometimes a bit confusing to see a Pro-Am car right up there, but of course we've got the pros in this session. In silver category, when you've got 2 silver car drivers, it doesn't matter which driver is in this first session, but I think Romain's back.
He's bailed out, yeah. Look at the second sector. He lost 1.5 seconds nearly of the time. Well, over 1.5 seconds considering he was up in the first sector.
I would be very disappointed then to see the purple sector of Sector 1, unless he's just going to reset himself. He's got 30 seconds to do so. Has he got the tyres to do so?
Well, it's interesting because we saw just before we went to Romain Monti a shot of Victor Weyrich getting out of the Racing Spirit of Le Mans Aston Martin, and they were all fired up and punched up and going, yep, we think we've got pole position. If Romain Monti can deliver that first sector again and then keep it relatively stable in the second and third, they might have celebrated a little bit too early.
Well, let's see. He was very strong in the first sector. That livery is really, really attractive. There are the pole holders right now.
Yeah, they think they've done this.
Well, fair enough. They're 0.8 of a second clear over everybody else. I mean, that is a huge lap from Victor Weyrich. I understand why he might be feeling comfortable, but what is Monti's first sector?
Last-minute moment for Antoine Potti. They've managed to put the Toyota into 3rd position, the X-Swift car, so that's a good lap from them. A 2:12.840, just 17 thousandths slower than Paul Carharp in the Alpine. Gilbert and Lariche are next up in their Audis, Pro-Am against Silva, and then Emil Scadas, still top 6 in that guest Toyota Gazoo. I've always rated Emil Scadas' talents very highly in international motor racing. He comes here as a guest driver in the GT4 European Series and bangs the Toyota in P6, very strong.
Lots of feedback between drivers. Victor Weyrich talking to Konstantin Lachnauer about what to do in the second session. Looking at that time from Romain Monti, he's given away 0.7 of a second in Sector 2. There still could be an improvement from Monti because he is at the moment 2 seconds off Victor Weyrich's time. But it's not going to be pole by the looks of things. To be fair, 0.7 of a second still puts him in second spot there, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. Interesting, though, what a difference a day makes as we watch Andreas Bachmann walking away from the... It still says Pro Sport, Aston, doesn't it? So an interesting one there
that's exactly what I thought. It's just a change of name.
It's a change of name. But interestingly, what a difference a day makes. Free Practice 1 yesterday was topped by the number 7 Mirage Aston. They've just crossed the line. 36th. That's a big difference compared to yesterday.
Look at the top of screen. I think Monti will complete this lap. Here he comes out of the final turn, and Monti's going to come across the line. Was 33rd. Is it going to be an improvement? That wasn't Romain Monti, was it? He's still waiting for him. And in fact, he came into the pits.
Yeah, he bailed.
So he bailed out of that one. Who was that then? That was Jimenez, the 72 Aston Martin.
They went up to 22nd.
Yeah.
Now there is Antoine Potti. Did a great job right at the end there to put the Toyota into 3rd position for the ex-Swift crew. And
there you go. Monti did come over the line.
Oh, he did?
And he didn't improve, but he did just take the checkered flag. I just heard him come underneath us.
Yes, he did. Do you know what? He was fastest of all in the first sector still. That time remains 35.882. So they could have got, well, the theoretical best, if he'd have held that all together, would have been a 2:11.6. So he could have got a sub 2:12. So I think Victor Weyrich and the Racing Spirit of Le Mans team are actually quite relieved. They started celebrating, and actually the other Aston could well have taken it, but then on the end they didn't. Here it is so far, Racing Spirit of Le Mans up front from the Autosport Alpine and the ex-Swift Toyota. Then the leading Pro-Am is the Santalok Junior Audi of Gregory Gilbert. Speed car Audi, the Toyota Gazoo Sweden of Emil Scadas, the Eastside Mercedes, the BCMC Eastside Mercedes of Marc de Fulgencio, and then the WNS Pro-Am and the Elite McLaren of Jack Mitchell, making the top 10 just ahead of the Borisson Automotive BMWs. Leading AM car, Laurent Hergon in the Autosport Alpine, ahead of Gaud Castelli, CSA Racing, and Antoine Leclerc in the Code Alpine. All the way through, you can find your favourite stars and drivers from the various different categories. The big battle in AM is going to be between the Autosport Alpine and the AVR Avatar Porsche, with the number 72 GPA Aston Martin of Kevin Jimenez popping himself into 3rd in the class there, right at the bitter end. Those three will definitely be the cars to battle for Race 1 honours. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they go, but certainly Racing Spirit of Le Mans hang on for the pole. There's the second run of times. And there is an absence there of the number 44 Allied Racing car. Christensen and Wallace did not go out and set a time. The only car to sit out of the session. However, everybody else managing to get themselves into a relative good position, and with the exception of Parisian Gomard in the AGS, 6.7 seconds covers the entirety of the field. Very close indeed, and great to see the battles continuing in GT4 the same way they did in Monza. So it's very different indeed compared to what we saw in Free Practice 1 yesterday. It was definitely going to be all the way for the Mirage Aston Martin team number 7, but they are way down outside the top 30 today. It's very different on Saturday morning. Good battles then in time qualifying 1. A lot of cars getting themselves up for a very decent early Saturday morning run. Great to see the guest performers from Toyota Gazoo Racing Sweden, Emil Scadas, the former Gearbox karting champion, getting straight on with the business and into the top 6. Laurent Hergon getting the pole position in the AM category for the Alpine squad from Autosport GP/LS. A great run from them. Antoine Potti coming right up at the last and getting into the top 3 for the ex-Swift Racing Toyota squad. Did a fantastic job throughout. Not a bad run either for the 42 crew. The Audi getting themselves up there. Santalok Junior Team Audi, Gregory Gilbert, the leading Pro-Am car. Paul Ricard up in the Autosport Alpine, the closest to the pole position, 0.8 of a second away though. A big margin and a big gap to try and catch these guys. Victor Weyrich, pole in the Racing Spirit of Le Mans Aston. They take pole in qualifying 1. What will happen in Q2? Fabulous battle so far then here at Circuit Paul Ricard, if in the GT4 European Series. Now for those who are watching qualifying in GT4 for the first time, how does the procedure work now?
So second qualifying is for the second race, the Sunday race, and we'll see the second of our drivers. For the Pro-Am category, that will be the AM drivers. Obviously for the silver category, it's the silver driver because they've got silver drivers, and for the AMs, it is an AM, another AM. So expect to see your Pro-Ams that you were surprised to see quite high up the field, less high up the field in this particular session. Disappointment from Allied Racing. Noticed on that timing screen that Ole Christiansen had not made it out. Oscar Lund Christensen, sorry. Jordan Wallace should be in that car for the second session. And Allied was the only other team to come into the pits midway through the session, if you remember. So question marks over there. 718 Cayman GT4 RS. Although I did drive past their awning, because it's one of the awnings that sits just in front of us in our car park, and everything looked normal in the awning. So a little question mark to go and dig out over the lunch period before we get into our first race this evening. And as I said, it's not really this evening, actually. Usually it would be in the evening, but actually, because we've got a race this evening for the Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe, the GT4 race is a bit earlier than it would usually be programmed. So 3 o'clock local time might be pre-weather, actually, that. Yesterday, the weather came in at about 4. So that's McLaren Trophy territory rather than GT4 Europe Series. So we might get away with a dry race as we have done, and it does help a lot. There's one of the lovely little Alpines. Do love the shape of this car. Used in both the one-make series in France that come to Paul Ricard, also, of course, used in the main category of the French GT Championship, which runs to GT4 spec. And there's a variation that runs in Rally GT as well. Absolutely awesome vehicle to see on the mountain roads.
We just saw Loic Villiger there, confusing us with his Juan Pablo Montoya tribute helmet. He clearly likes that design. There's Tom Emsen, the son of an auctioneer, doing a fantastic job. Came up from the world of Daytona Motorsport endurance karting and has worked his way into a brilliant McLaren seat. And there is William Jenkins in the number 78 car.
Yeah, so he's new to that car, isn't he?
He is indeed, replacing Michael Creese, I do believe. So Creasy has obviously got something else on this particular weekend, and William Jenkins slots into the McLaren. An interesting point from Q1, the number 93, the SRS Team Stock Rennsport Porsche, has just had its best lap time cancelled, with Ricardo Dort setting that time, and that was due to pit lane speeding infringement, unfortunately. So that time has now been erased. We'll get the update on the positions very soon, I'm sure. But as we gear ourselves up ready for Q2, it's definitely going to be an interesting challenge now for all of the contenders out there. Roman Wozniak in the 45 Audi, just trying to get himself ready to go. Very distinctive with that day-glow yellow and grey colour scheme.
As we see from Full Motorsport, they're always good at colouring their cars very, very brightly indeed.
They want the television time, don't they?
Well, at least you can recognise which one it is, but don't confuse them necessarily with the other very bright Audis from the Team Speed car, the Burger King car, which was so successful in our first round in Monza of Benjamin Lariche and Robert Consigny.
Yeah, I actually caught up with Robert Consigny when his son was racing a couple of weeks ago at the Karting European Championships. His son, Andy, doing a fantastic job out in Třinec in the Czech Republic. He was very positive. He was just so frustrated because he felt that a win could have been possible in race 2 as well. He felt, you know, we could have gone back-to-back there, no problem.
Greedy.
It is a little bit, isn't it? But, hey, he genuinely felt it was on, and he said, no, you know, we know what went wrong at Monza. We know how it fell apart on the second race. I'd actually bumped into him that night on the streets of Monza on the night after the win, and they were very happy, very much in calm, measured party mood. But no, they come here full of excitement, full of ambition. They think they can win again at least one of the 2 races here at Paul Ricard, and their eyes are coming in wide open.
Green flag at the end of pit lane. Off we go to get the cars back up and running again. They will have a new set of tyres. They're not allowed to refuel, so the cars will be slightly lighter. But a new set of boots for our AM drivers and our second silver drivers in the Silver Cup. Didn't really mention our winners from round one, did we? Michael Schreier and Gabriel Piana were kind of not particularly visible in that particular session. Neither were Berke Bessler and Tom Edgar, who lie second in the Silver Cup. The BMW is not quite as starring, perhaps, as we saw in Monza. And different circuits do favour different brands. The cars are balanced so that they are all so very equal, generally, but it's impossible, absolutely impossible, to balance a car for a straight, flat-out dash and then hard braking of Monza to, I mean, this is still pretty fast, but a little bit more flowing. And then you go to somewhere like Barcelona, which is a lot more flowing. There's no way that a car, the balance can be the same across all those three different championships. So there's Jordan Grimaud, the AM driver, taking over from Romain Monti, and he heads out.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? At Monza, the moral of the story seems to be if you want to win, get a BMW. Here at Paul Ricard so far, the moral of the story seems to be don't get a BMW because they're not even in the top 10 in Q1. The Morrison Automotive cars were 11th and 12th. You mentioned Michael Schreier and Gabriele Piana. Well, they were 19th for Michael Schreier in the first race qualifying session, so they've got to improve by quite a way in Q2. Another interesting thing to note is that at Monza, in both races, the car that started in pole position was the car that also came through to win, despite all of the overtaking and the battles and the flotsam and jetsam we had in between those two incidents occurring. So if you're in pole position, you're in good stead. That's definitely good news for the number 7 Mirage crew. I was going to say the Mirage crew, but it's the other Aston that managed to get the pole position, wasn't it? Victor Weyrich, the Racing Spirit of Le Mans car. If you're in pole position for that race, you're obviously looking very good, but coming into race 2, that's going to be quite interesting to note. And I have to say, I would, on merit so far, note that there's been a fastest lap from an Aston Martin in one free practice session, a fastest Aston Martin from another practice session again, but in terms of the dominant force, it's not really clear that the Aston Martin is absolutely the car to have so far at Paul Ricard, because there are quite a few cars out there that can challenge it, certainly, and it's not as dominant, let's say, as the BMW was at Monza.
And that is exactly what the balance of performance is trying to achieve. I can't remember if they actually did the balance of performance here. They usually, the GT3 cars get balanced here in Paul Ricard, and GT2 as well. But I'm not sure the GT4 cars were done on the same weekend. Either way, the whole idea is that regardless of which car you choose to drive and sit in, you should have an equal opportunity to take victory, and they do such a good job considering how different. Look, there's a Mercedes, right? Big front engine, lots of weight over the front axle, very little over the rear axle. You're sitting quite far back. How different that is in comparison to the little Alpine, for instance, that doesn't even have the same capacity of engine and sits much more mid-engine and balance-wise. How do you make those two cars equally as fast? And it's an amazing science that SRO have absolutely nailed over the years in a way that I don't think any other category or organisation seem to be able to do so in the same kind of, this is how it is, don't complain about it. And you never hear people moan and say, you know, sometimes racing drivers make excuses, but generally, it all seems, from outside, really, really good.
There are some pretty decent engineering and scrutineering boffins out there in SRO, aren't there? They really do give us some fantastic entertainment. We were just looking at the NM Racing Mercedes, the number 15. They need an absolute whirlwind this morning compared to what they had yesterday in free practice 2, because they ended up 55th of the 56 cars. They didn't get a decent lap together because of the rain, so they are just hopeful that they can get out there and set a reasonably competitive time at this point. We're looking at the 290. That is the Toyota Gazoo Racing Sweden car of Hans Holmland. So Holmland has taken over that car from Emil Skadas. We assume, I guess now, that this is the one that is probably going to give us the best wild card upset, I suppose, up at the front end of the field. They managed to put the car in the top 6 courtesy of Emil Skadas. It'll be interesting to see what Hans Holmland can do. If they can get in the top 10, that will still be very, very impressive from them. They obviously go top at the moment on a 2:18.0, but that is just your banker. We're going to go at least 5.5, potentially even 6 seconds quicker.
And that is a Pro-Am category car, so Emil will be the Pro in that car and Hans is the Am. So I think you're being a little ambitious to expect him to be in a similar position, but ultimately great to see the Scandinavian entry coming in and really performing at a high level. We'll see these guys as well join us at Spa-Francorchamps. That's not the end of July, like the traditional Spa-Francorchamps date for the 24 hours. It is the start of July, just a week after the longest night, thanks to Formula One. But I'm actually really looking forward to seeing getting an extra couple of hours worth of light driving and just slightly challenging the drivers with a slightly newer complexion to racing at the start of July rather than the end of July.
Yeah, there's going to be some interesting challenges that are going to be faced with that, because obviously you're racing at a circuit that you've got data for from 4 weeks later in the year from previous years. So it's kind of like they're going to have to learn the technical complexities potentially of the slight differences in condition all over again. And that's going to make this potentially the most watchable year for the CrowdStrike Spa 24-hour weekend. I think it could be one of the highlights of the world motorsport calendar.
Well, it always is, yeah. Anyway. And GT4 will be racing, I think it's Friday evening. They race into the night, so the race itself is actually quite late in the evening because sunset is so late in the evening, and they'll get that opportunity to have a little bit of dusk running, which obviously is a completely different challenge to what they are usually used to.
So now the lap times are going to start to come down. For the sake of argument at the moment, it is one of the guest drivers that's on the top spot. That is Patrick Skug, who has managed to put the Porsche number 278, the Gerhardsson team, up into the top spot. That's obviously the team that's based on one of the Swedish race circuits out there, Gerhardsson, which is one of the most ancient and most decorated of the Swedish circuits. Not quite as decorated in its history as the likes of Mantorp Park or Anderstorp, but certainly a lot of great racing goes on there in the Scandinavian Championships as Ribendell Sart and Merrick are trying to put the Mirage cars up at the top spot. Ribendell Sart fastest of all in the second split. That's worth keeping an eye on. Merrick is just done a 2:18.1 to go over the line in third place. Honland gets a 2:14.7, so he's already improved by 3.3 seconds on the previous lap he'd set.
Yeah, we're still miles away from the target, though. The target is 13, and the best time is a 2:14.7. And Merrick was fast in the first two sectors, but backed out of it in the final sector and lost 3 seconds. We're also seeing quite a lot of these times being taken away due to track limits. There was a lot in the first session, and expect the same in this one, especially with AM drivers in the Pro-Am category cars. They will find the absolute precision a little bit more tricky, especially when there's a lack of reference. You know, this circuit is so flat, the curbs are so flat, the reference points are so far away from the circuit as well. It's difficult to know exactly where to touch the brake. It's difficult to know exactly where to turn in to get the apex, especially at high speed at the end of the Mulsanne, even if they aren't, sorry, not Mulsanne, Mistral, even if they are not doing the full Mistral without the chicane. These guys are taking the chicane. I'm getting ahead of myself by a week.
By a week, indeed. Well, when you get into Courbe de Signes, that's when things get really tricky, because you're going through that, still accelerating, trying not to hit the brake. You're trying to carry as much speed through that right-hander as possible. And that's where the car washes out. It's a blind apex for one thing. You're going through hoping that you've turned in enough, and you can only correct it on the exit when it's already gone wrong.
That's a really good time from Alain Fuerte. Yes, that Alain Fuerte of many a Le Mans start, and he's done a 13.5 in his Pro-Am machine, and he is in the Pro-Am category, sharing with Laurent Hergon. Hergon spent many a lap around the Paul Ricard circuit in developing the Renault Sport machines that have become the Alpines, and so Fuerte second position. Varuti in third position right now, also in the fully, not Pro-Am, fully Am category, I should say. Those two are 1-2 in the Am category after Monza. Varuti is here on his own this weekend. He's the only driver to not share with another driver, as Julien Piquet, who was with him in Monza, is not able to join him. So Varuti's got a lot of work. He's already done one session and maybe that's helped him just get up to speed straight away into this one.
Here we go again. The number 74 Aston has gone top once more. Konstantin Lachenauer, who's taken over the car. Fastest in Sector 2 and 3 with a 40.0 and a 56.1. That really puts them in a perfect position, doesn't it? If they are pole position in both races, then they can command things their way in the opening couple of laps of both and then really get their strategy down pat. Julien Briche in the JSB Aston Martin going second in the Pro-Am category so far on a 2:13.002. So almost half a second back. Apparently we've just had a spin and a rejoin at the second corner, so that was Taylor Hagler in the WNS Porsche lost the car and has managed to rejoin. So a bit of a moment there for the WNS crew, but certainly for Racing Spirit and Le Mans, they lead the way at the moment. Back up comes the X-Swift Racing Toyota, top 3 again for Etienne Chilly this time, going just quicker than Louis Merrick in the Mirage Aston, who's now just displaced Alain Ferté. Simon Timmerman in the second of the Autosport GP Alpines has gone 6th. Alain Ferté's just clocked in a 2:13.2 now, another very strong lap from Alain Ferté. And then we have Grisel, who has come through in 7th place in the GBA Aston. Alban Veruti's Avatar Porsche now slightly down to 8th. Tom Edgar, who was so brilliant at Monza, at 9th position in the Borisson Automotive BMW. And then Lonnie Martin in the Full Motorsport Audi, top 10 at the moment. Incredible to think that we've got the top cars in all 3 categories in the top 4 outright.
Luck now a little bit messy through Senior and just catching a bit of curb. He's got a good second sector on the board, but I think the third sector may not be quite as strong. Behind him was Luc Ibanez, who had a very good first sector, but not such a strong second sector. We pick up the number 4 Aston Martin, which is down in 41st position. That's not, will be an improvement, I think, but not a massive shock. And we're waiting for Lachenauer and Ibanez to come across the line and complete these last laps. We've been following Merrick, who is also
second.
He's gone up to second position now, so an improvement there. And Ibanez is on the pole position for Mercedes. Wow.
Very good lap from Luc Ibanez as the NM Mercedes that didn't really set a time at all in free practice 2 has managed to come through and grab the top spot, and he's still committed through the first chicane. 2 on the deck and 2 in the air as they are trying to find more. But look, Loic Villiger has actually gone quickest of all in Sector 2. Despite a bit of a tricky Sector 1, they're probably going to find a time good enough for the top 5. So if you're Etienne Chilly or Ruben Del Sart, I'd be worried about Loic Villiger in the Alpine about now, because I reckon that time could be around about the 4, maybe P5 mark. If he comes through in a good time, 2:13, 2/7. So a bit of a scruffy third sector, unfortunately, for Loic Villiger, who comes towards us now. And a bit of a tricky one there for the Alpine. That third sector, a little bit the undoing of Loic Villiger. That's the sister car, the number 35 machine of Perassuti, who has just come through in 24th. So Villiger 8th and Perassuti 25th now, actually, because he's just been displaced. But Loic Villiger was actually the fastest Sector 2 of any car out there. And yet again, Gabriele Piana comes strong when he needs to. Second position.
As our championship leaders in the Silver Cup, interesting and impressive to see so many AMs up in the top 10. As you say, Alain Fuerte, Loic Villiger is the AM in that machine. Christophe Amon is the AM in the 42. Julien Briche is the AM in his team that he shares with his brother Florian. They didn't do very well in Monza, had a few issues, but this is a track that they have won in front-wheel drive and know very well the JSB competition. And now Florian and Julien able to share a car together, and second row start will be so strong for them if it stays as it is. But there's still a lot of improvement to go with 6 minutes still on the clock.
Gabriele Piana clearly getting offended at my comment earlier on about, you know, if you're a Paul Ricard, don't get a BMW. Hang on a minute, we've got a very competitive car. How dare you? Second position he goes on a 2:12.3. Lachenauer and Briche in the Astons, 3rd and 4th. Ruben Del Sart's put his in 7th as well, so still some good times all around. Very impressed so far, though, by the all-round nature of the Alpine. They are 8th, 9th and 10th. In the session so far.
Well, don't forget that this is a place where the Alpine would have been developed. This is a place where Laurent Hergon will have pounded around for lap after lap to try and get the car working. They come here as part of the French Championship as well. So huge amount of data for the little Alpine to digest and make sure it's strong here in home territory.
Ruben Del Sart comes up to 4th position in the Mirage Aston. So that puts them into the second row of the starting grid for race 2 tomorrow. And and that puts them ahead of both Briche and Chili. Hamon is still there in 7th position in front of Villiger, Ferte, and now Robert Consani comes up to 10th position. So Robert Consani has put the Audi into the top 10. As we look at Etienne Chili, still trying to put the Toyota back into the top 3 once again. They've actually now slipped to 6th position. Slight run wide through Cours de Signe. Got to be careful of that kind of thing. That's really going to hamper the chances of getting a decent lap time on the board. But yeah, that lap from Luc Ibanez, that wasn't just a good lap, was it? That was a great lap.
In a Mercedes, 2:12.091. Shares that car with Papadopoulos, who was in the 20s, I think, in the first of our sessions, and 0.3 of a second gap between Ibanez and Piana, with the first of the Aston Martins now 3rd position. First Porsche, by the way, is Veruti down in 15th spot. The AM driver is the best of our Porsches. When you've got WNS, when you've got Allied Racing running Porsches as well, that is quite a surprise. To the next best is 22nd spot. So again, I think we felt the same was an issue in Monza. They actually hadn't quite got themselves up to speed.
4th for Shelley. He's just improved big time. 2:12.8 for the Toyota driver there. Is that Ibanez thinking, you know what, I think we've done all we can do in this Mercedes. We don't really need to do any more. He's down in sectors 1 and 2, but comparable. So they could go and stretch it out again for another lap if they feel the tyres can go there. And he's certainly not pitting in again, is he, Luc Ibanez? They may feel there's just a handful of cars out there that could challenge them again. As up to 8th now comes Lenertz, the German driver, Marcel Lenertz in the BCMC East Side Mercedes. They clock an 8th position. So they are starting to move their way forward as well.
So I wonder if Ibanez here is aware of the car ahead of him. 49th position is Loic Meyer, the Mercedes, which is just ahead. So if you're about to start a lap, you don't really want to be that close to another car, especially in the first sector, which is quite sinuous here. If you were looking for a slipstream, maybe, and Gabriel Piana's now gone fastest. No, he hasn't. They've cancelled the lap, the pole position lap.
Right, so they've cancelled
So
Luc Ibanez's time.
lap. Yeah.
That's disastrous, really, isn't it? Because where does that drop him to? That drops him all the way down.
33rd.
To 33rd position. Goodness me.
That's the difficulty about getting excited in these sessions, because you're like, wow, that's an incredible lap time.
And then it turns out it wasn't legal. Oh dear, what a shame. And unfortunately, they've really lost their chance to go for another one as well, because they got held up by that slower car.
He might have another lap. He might have enough time to start another lap.
He's really got to get on with it, hasn't he? Piana's parked it, Lachenau has parked it as well. And for the second time in as many rounds, it looks as though the number 2 BMW is going to be starting from pole position in race 2, just as they were in Monza.
Yeah, German champions 2 years ago came in middle of last year into the European Championship and instantly made an impact. And so far, they have been the class of the field. Little improvement from Poulet in 26th spot now, flashing his lights. But as you say, Luc Ibanez, the team need to get onto the radio and say, right, get yourself reset because we need another lap from you. He was 3 seconds slower in sector 2 than his best, and so this is definitely not a lap, but I'm sure he's preparing and resetting himself. There are people out there still on lap time. Julien Briche might have an improvement from 5th position right now. Better than he's been through the first sector.
Merrick's going well in sector 2 as well. He's just come up with a 40.17, comparable in sector 1, so they may move up Louis Merrick from 12th just about into the top 10. It's not going to be fantastic for the team that were fastest in free practice 1, but they certainly have an opportunity.
Here's Briche then. His team, JSB, stands for Julien Briche. Used to race front wheel touring cars. Felt like he had to take 2 stabs at that apex. A little bit of a squeal from his Pirelli rubber.
If he's looked after the tyres, he may just get one more go if this isn't quite going to be good enough, because when he crosses the line, he'll have a little bit of change on the clock still to play with to try and have one more crack at it. But Julien Briche, it's not a nice exit, is it?
Well, it's also 4 wheels off the circuit. I don't know exactly if race control are monitoring every single corner. He comes across the line, and he does improve to 3rd position, Julien Briche. So that's a great lap time if it stands.
By 0.06 of a second better than the Toyota of Etienne Chili. And look who's watching on quite nervously, Gabriele Piana, just keeping an eye on it. Please don't beat it, please, please. We've worked so hard to get back up here, and they really don't want to be beaten again. As in the pits, that's the 72 crew, that is Kevin Jimenez and Florent Giraud.
Loic Jimenez came into the pits, so they are going to start 32nd position. Having had pole for a couple of minutes, NM Racing will be very disappointed with that, knowing that they've got the pace 2.5 seconds down from the lap that they set, but was deemed to be over track limits. And they've still got cancellations flowing in from race control. They live race control about 4 or 5 minutes behind reality because they're always monitoring what's happening beforehand.
Checkered flag out on circuit then, waiting to see if there is going to be one final roll of the dice. There certainly isn't for the Aston of Julien Briche, because their first sector was a 37.9. They decided not to go for it on their next lap around. What happened to Merrick? They went 9th. So Merrick has put the Aston of Mirage number 7 up into 9th place. So they did manage to make the top 10 then in the end. Tom Edgar is on a reasonable lap, 36.8 and a 40.5. They may just nudge in towards the top 10. I don't think they're quite going to make it to the top 10 itself. And it all depends on how this final sector, 15th for Tom Edgar, no improvement then in the 3rd sector. Just tried to get it all nailed together, and I think it was just traffic that ended up impeding right at the end there. But the silver pole and the outright pole position is Gabriele Piana. The pro-am pole is Julien Briche for the moment.
We still have cars out on circuit.
We have Perisuti in the second Alpine.
Yeah, Perisuti's in the final sector of the lap. So is Petit as well, although Petit's middle sector not quite as strong. Here is Perisuti for Code Racing Developments. Comes towards the line. There's the checkered flag. Was 23rd.
Improvements in both the first sectors, so this could be strong. Over the line. And what has he achieved?
Oh,
one place.
Well done.
One place. Hey, they all count. They all make a difference. So 22nd for them in the end, as Loic Villigier is just being consulted by his teammate Antoine Leclerc. No relation, of course, to the famous Grand Prix family. But I think they can be reasonably happy with that. 7th position for them, the leading Alpine.
Championship leaders as well in the Pro-Am category.
And if Julien Briche's time does get disallowed, they could be looking at the Pro-Am pole, potentially. So they obviously have to keep that in the back of their minds to a certain degree. So I think they can be very satisfied with that. And there it is, car 12, cancellation of lap time. That is Tom Edgar. That's unfortunate. So the Borisson Automotive BMW losing a lap there. And it looks like Kronberg has lost one as well.
Just for your reference, that was the lap time set at 9:58. It's 10:07 now, so race control are 10 minutes behind.
That's how much they've got to do.
That's how much they've got to do, yeah, exactly.
Well, 2 cars are also under investigation for speeding in the pits. Patrick Skrug from Race Team Galerason and the number 94 car is also under investigation. And that is Leon Duque in the Sorg Rennsport Porsche.
And Constantine's just lost his time as well.
There we are. So, here is the provisional, and we stress it is provisional classification. The Hofer Racing by Bonk BMW. Once again, it's Schrey and Piana in qualifying 2 that go pole, just as they did in Monza. The Weyrich and Lachenauer Racing Spirit of Le Mans Aston. For the moment, it is the JSB Aston that goes pole position in Pro-Am. Then Etienne Chilly put the X-Swift Toyota in 4th, Ruben Del Sart in the Mirage Aston, the BCMC Eastside Mercedes and Marcel Lenertz. Then the Alpine of Loic Villigier in 7th in the Pro-Am. And then we have Alain Ferté in the Autosport Alpine in front of the Mirage Aston of Louis Merrick and the Autosport GP LS Group Alpine of Simon Thiemann. And although that graphic tells you, all of that graphic tells you the provisional positions, we can now tell you, unfortunately, that the number 24 car of Julien Briche, that time has in fact been cancelled.
I don't think it's that time. It's 9:59, so it was too early.
Ah, okay. There was also a cancellation of a time for the number 2.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. But these
are from earlier as well.
These are current lap times,
yes,
so they're still working through it. So yeah, go back onto the website in a few moments' time, and we'll give you the confirmation.
Let's put it this way, these are the provisional results, and in about 15 minutes time it might have changed a bit, but fair play to everybody, obviously working very hard indeed to keep an eye on things, and you know, we're very much in debt to our stewards, Steve Burns, Klaus Elofsson, Jean-Marie Krempf and Wim Koels, and obviously our race director Joel de Valle, who has been working very hard indeed, along with clerk of the course Jean-Louis Saucy and the technical director Jean-Marie Boulouille. to keep an eye on things. But what a session. Very exciting stuff. Once again in the GT4 European Series, qualifying gives us a series of questions, but not as many answers as we would like. Hans Holmund continuing his run in the Toyota Gazoo Racing Sweden guest car, the leading of the guests. 55, Alain Ferté doing his bit in fantastic style out on the circuit, doing what he does best for the Alpine team to go fastest in the AM category. There were some star performances all the way through. Unfortunate that Luc Jimenez's pole position time was deleted. Etienne Shelley putting the X-Swift Toyota right up at the sharp end. Ruben Del Sart in the Mirage Aston Martin, and the sister car of Julien Briche right up in the top 5 provisionally as well. Still unsure if Briche's time is going to stand. If it does, he'll be the leading Pro-Am car. 74 of Konstantin Lachenauer is back in the top 2 once again. First in Q1, second in Q2, but in Q2, pole position for the second round in a row is Gabriele Piana of the Hofer Racing by Bonk Motorsport BMW. Can they win it again the same way they did in Monza?